What's up, everybody? So happy to see you here on another Lost In, where we talk about cool cars that made their impact on the automotive industry. Today we're going to be talking about some true Brazilian Mopar awesomeness. We're talking about no little slouching straight six today. We're talking about some awesome V8 action. The Dodge Dart. Strap in, let's go. Way back in the 1960s and 70s, Dodge was producing a boss vehicle, the V8 Dodge Dart. They weren't messing around with V6s or straight six or even four cylinders. They were all in on the V8. We gotta go back a little bit, back to 1959, the Shinkum Shambord. Man, that's hard for me to pronounce. But this was the Dodge Dart before the Dodge Dart. It was powered by a small block Ford V8. It was the first domestically produced V8 here in Brazil. The Shambord and its successor, the Esplanada, were built until 1969, when the more modern competitor to Ford's Galaxy was needed. This time, Chrysler stepped up their game. They brought something a little bit more up to date, especially in the engine compartment. Chrysler really hammered out an agreement with the Brazilian government to modernize their plants, doing a $50 million investment to upscale tools and tooling. Meanwhile, until all the renovations were done, Chrysler still had to produce the Shambord, but now with much better quality. Finally, in 1969, the new Chrysler do Brasil was unveiled, revealing a genuine American Mopar product, the Dodge Dart. Of course, the first model was the four-door sedan, equipped with the very new small block LA318, and it had a 3-on-the-collar manual transmission. The car was a very nice surprise. The A-platform Brazilian Dart had the same body and design as this 1969 American Dart. The engine did get a 2-barrel carb, and it did have lower compression due to all the ethanol in Brazilian gas. And this car was rated at 195 horsepower. And a lot of people talk about those numbers were being, skewed due to the property owner tax of anything producing over 200 horsepower here in Brazil. You were going to pay a lot of money. So Chrysler was pretty smart in kind of tweaking their numbers, but 195 horsepower, an extra 5 horsepower, your butt's not going to know the difference. But I tell you what, it had enough to burn some rubber, that's for sure. The market really had an enthusiasm for this car, really accepted by the people. And it really found a comfortable spot right between the Brazilian Opala and the Brazilian Ford Galaxy. It fit right between those two. The Opala had the straight six, the Galaxy had a V8, so it was the nice middle ground for a vehicle. This spot was so successful for Chrysler that they decided only to offer the 318. They weren't selling any cheap V6s here. Go over to GM for that, or get yourself a Maverick. By the end of 1970, Chrysler introduced the 2-door hardtop coupe, absolute boss design. And you know, of course, it goes without saying, the 2-door outsold the 4-door. Sales numbers for these vehicles were so good that the bigwigs were thinking, let's make us a real sporty one. Which the solution to that is obvious, a GT. But that wasn't quite what the Brazilian design team had in mind. You know, Chrysler Corp had created a car that many enthusiasts, me included, think is the quintessential perfect muscle car, the 6869 Dodge Charger RT. An aggressive and intimidating stance and style. powerful engines, badass panels and holders. An absolute heritage from the racetrack made this vehicle awesomeness all the way around. I mean, even the name was badass. So why not take some design cues from this wonderful vehicle and stick it on our Brazilian Dodge Dart? And that's exactly what they did. 1971, the Brazilian Dodge Charger RT was unveiled. It had the front fascia that covered the headlights, some very cool stripes, and that stretched C-pillar called Mexicana in some parts of the United States. Finally, a 4 on the floor was standard. The most important changes were in the engine compartment. The LA small block V8 got a different 2-barrel carburetor, giving a bit more ponies, and the engine block was painted gold, of course also increasing horsepower just because, gold covered. And at this time, finally, front disc brakes were adopted. That's a big score, you can now stop. Simultaneously, there was a LS version that was unveiled, a bit cheaper. And the cool thing about Chrysler at this time is the higher and the lower, you can mix and match whatever you want. If you want a little bit from upscale or you want a little bit more from downscale, you can build a car of your dream. In '72, a even cheaper model was released, the SE, and this didn't even offer hubcaps, no chrome, no AC, no ventilation. It was just your basic large block vehicle. Still cool, especially if you wanted to race it. 1973 brought the first cosmetic changes and some new versions. Everything from the Spartan SE to the Grand Sedan got a little bit more spiffified. There was a Mopar for everybody's taste, but at this time, the oil crisis was grabbing the world by the BALLS. So sales numbers were crashing hard, and everybody was suffering at this time. Every automotive production line was just really suffering. So the big wigs were coming up with some new clever ideas, and that's when they come up with the Dodge 1800. This was a little like Hillman Avenger, some real racing pedigree behind it over in Europe, but when they brought it here, they really didn't, they rushed its production. So it was just low quality, not well made, and that made a bad reputation for the little 1800, and it really did not do good here in Brazil. So I did a story all about it, check it out. But back to the main focus, the Brazilian Dodge Dart. For the following years, the big old Dodge really didn't change much. So the regular Dodges got some exclusive stuff that was really only for the Chargers. They started bleeding out their inventory into the lesser vehicles to try build up sales, but unfortunately this killed the this really killed the Brazilian Dodge Charger's novelty. Why have an awesome grill like that when everybody gets the awesome grill? It takes away the specialness. Special. You're not special anymore. 1979 really brought some changes. It was the same A-body at its heart, but the front and rear fascias were changed. Chrysler was spiffifying it once again, but how much can you change if you're not changing the body? It's still the same vehicle. These Dodge Darts roughly had the same front as the '73 Dodge Dart, the American '73 Dodge Dart, but little variations in it. And the Brazilian rear, woohoo, got kind of the '74 rear end from its American brother. Not really anything creative or innovative. Chrysler was just swapping parts around, swapping those spittle germs all over the place, taking a little sip off of this cup, a little sip off of that cup, and those taillights found themselves on all different other vehicles, same with the front. I hope that made sense. The Grand Sedan got replaced by the LeBaron Magna. Got replaced by the LeBaron Magnum. Got replaced by the LeBaron Magnum. That sounds so wrong. And they did away with the extended rear roof buttress. Yeah, that was so beautiful. But the new cars were charming and the new design was very refreshing.
It's time that I start lying at 100%. What do you think of that?
So the Charger RT completely lost its, notoriety, its beautiful design cues that signified that as the Charger were done away with. And also the fate of the Brazilian V8 MOPARs here in Brazil at this time was pretty much done. The writing was on the wall. Volkswagen was coming in and taking over Chrysler do Brazil, mainly for the truck market. Volkswagen didn't have anything building trucks, but Chrysler did have that infrastructure, and Volkswagen do Brazil desperately wanted it. The 1989 Chrysler Dart was already built underneath the management of Volkswagen do Brazil. And that was the last year of that weird little Charger RT. Because in 1981, Chrysler do Brazil was kaput, done, over, closed their doors. And odd enough, the LA 318 was produced for a few more years. However, it was converted to run on ethanol. This car has become more than a collectible vehicle here in Brazil. It's really, once again, one of those historic monuments to Brazilian automotive history. If you guys like what we're doing here, please give it a little thumbs up, subscribe. I'd love to see you here in the comment section. I always read and I always try to respond to you guys, but like I say, I'll see you guys on the flip side. Até a próxima. Ciao, ciao.
His interpretation lacks a certain masculinity.